right, we are back in the club today. I'm your co-host, Chris Jager, joined with Adam Sochinsky.
Hello.
And we have the marvelous Mike Wilkinson, Assistant Vice President of Student Affairs at the University of South Alabama. Go Jags.
All right. Glad to be here. Glad
Welcome.
to be with y'all.
Welcome, Mike.
So, Mike, I think it's one of those things when we look at higher education, always there's an interesting way that you get brought into this career path. It's really a community that gets to know different institutions, different pockets of the campus, and really the region. How did you find yourself starting a career in higher education?
Yeah, that's a great question. My whole career has been in higher education, actually. I never in a million years would have imagined that I would be doing this work on a day-to-day basis. I work in student affairs. That's what I do right now, but I grew up a sports guy. I thought I was going to work in the sports industry for my whole life, my whole career. Yeah. And I guess when you ask how did I get started in higher education, I want to go back to my freshman year of college and think about that moment. I went to the Air Force Academy on a
very nice
scholarship.
Okay. Yeah.
Was playing baseball, chasing that dream. My grandpa was a pilot in World War II, and so had the opportunity to go and potentially become a pilot and then play baseball and chase that dream. And boy, life hit me in the face really quick.
It's funny how that happens.
Yeah, I was telling the guys earlier, I ended up transferring out of the Air Force Academy a week before grades hit at the end of the fall semester. Made that decision because I realized the military lifestyle wasn't for me.
Sure.
I was homesick. I'm a Texas guy. I've lived my whole career in Texas until this past year, moving to Alabama. And so moving to Colorado, that was interesting for me. And I had a girlfriend back home. And so I ended up picking up and coming back home to Texas the week before grades hit my freshman year. And had I not transferred when I did, I would have flunked out of that school.
Strategic.
I was not making A's. I was not making B's, not making C's.
Yeah.
I had to get out of there. And I wanted to remain eligible to play baseball in the spring. And so I was talking earlier today about how I transferred out, that I took a bunch of mini-mesters before the spring semester, all to end up going to a school, a junior college, and taking a red shirt. So I didn't even need to take those mini-mesters. But fast forward, I went to 10 different schools before I ended up at Texas A&M in College Station. I ended up there because of a girl I was dating at the time, the same girl that I was dating when I was homesick back in Colorado when I was there. And so I get to Texas A&M and I major in sports management. That was my way to stay connected to the sports industry, if you will. And I quit chasing the baseball dream at that point. I was focused on academics and honestly didn't know what I wanted to do. I grew up as a kid. I wanted to do kind of like the work that y'all do. Yeah. Actually, I wanted to be a shoe designer. I always wanted to design Nikes. I grew up a Nike fan, wanted to design shoes. But so I get to A&M and I have no idea what I want to do. But I knew I love sports, and they had this degree called sports management. And so I majored in that. My last semester of undergrad, I did an internship with the Houston Rockets. That was a life-changing experience. And I thought I was hot stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Really cool. Did this internship, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go into professional sports. That's where where my pathway is. And this was 2008, 2009. So the job industry was really tough back then. It was hard to get a job. And
a junior in college then.
I graduated, and I thought I was going to get a decent job. And the highest full-time paying job I had was an offer for $25,000 to sell tickets for the Houston Dynamo soccer team.
Sure.
And I thought, I can do better than that. Nothing against ticket sales, nothing against the Houston Dynamo or soccer, but I was like, what can I do next? And I was really kind of down, wasn't getting any job interviews, and I went to some of my mentors at the Houston Rockets, and they were like, hey, let me look at your resume. And so I gave them my resume, gave them my cover letter, and apparently my resume was total trash. And they came back and they let me know that, and they helped me edit and get it better. And then they also made me aware of this thing called a graduate assistant position. Okay. And I was like, oh, what is that? And they were like, you can get your master's degree paid for. You can also get real world work experience. And so I started on this quest to look for graduate assistant positions. And I was able to get a position as a GA in the athletic department at Angelo State University, doing like marketing, promotions, corporate sales, and had a great 2 years there. The girl that I was dating that I mentioned I was homesick about, we broke up right before that. And so I went out to Angelo State, and I hadn't had this collegiate experience, and I went buck wild. And I was partying, doing all the things. I was not a great professional, was not good at I was okay at my job. We'll just put it like that.
It was a learning moment.
It was a learning moment, definitely. But ended up getting a master's degree out of it. I got 2 years of relevant work experience. I realized I didn't know everything, that I needed to grow no matter what job that I was going to jump into. And fortunately, when I was done there, I graduated and got a job as assistant director of marketing promotions at Lamar University in their athletic department. I was doing a lot of the same things: marketing, promotions, corporate sales, tickets, trying to get butts in the seats, and was doing that for 2 to 3 years. And midway through that, and I'm going to try to keep this brief because a big part of my story, and I could talk for an hour on this, but this is
well, that's all we have, Mike. We have 1 hour.
1 hour. I got it. So we'll keep it to that. So I'm in that job, and I'm about a year in, and my mom is terminally ill at that point.
Oh, geez.
And she ends up in the hospital. She had hepatitis C, which led to liver cancer and cirrhosis, and her liver quit functioning, and she was in a coma in the hospital for 4 months. Had a doctor come into the room. Me and my little sister are in the hospital room, and look us in the eye and say, it's time to pull the plug on your mom. She was on life support, 12 machines keeping her alive. And I was the oldest in the room. I was scared to death. I didn't know what to do. My little sister's there. She's looking at me, and I knew I had to be strong. And so I was strong. We drove home that night. I told my dad what the doctors had said, and he sat us down on the patio, and he was like, hey, we're not going to quit on your mom. We're not going to give up on her. And so for me and my little sister, that kind of upset us because my mom knew that she was sick, and my mom always told us as a family that she didn't want to live on a bunch of machines, and she didn't want to live, quote unquote, like a vegetable. Sure. And so my dad saying we're not going to give up on her when doctors are telling us it's time to pull her off life support, that was a really interesting crossroads moment in my life, and really just catapulted me to where I'm at, if you will. Yeah. I mean, I'll bring it full circle and tell you how that came about. So he tells us we're not going to quit on our mom. Me and my sister, we're ticked off, we're upset. We end up getting over it. He's the leader of the house, and so we're like, all right, we're not going to quit on mom. And so we keep going to the hospital. She's still in the coma, and weeks go by. By the grace of God, a miracle, she comes out of that coma. She had to learn to walk and talk again. While she was in that coma, her kidneys quit functioning. So when she came out of the coma, had to learn to walk, talk. Then she had to live on dialysis to keep her alive. Yeah. Moment for me that changed everything was the moment I got a call from my dad. He said they were turning my childhood bedroom into basically a hospital room for her to do dialysis. Wow. She didn't have the strength to go to the dialysis center anymore. So that was about a year post coming out of the coma. And so it was a really, really rough journey. And so she's sitting there trying to survive. And around that time, I'm just working athletics games, driving up and down the road between Houston and Beaumont, Texas, where I was at the time, working 60, 70 hours a week. And I had colleagues in student affairs see me do that. And they said, Mike, what are you doing to yourself? You're running yourself into the ground. And why don't you think about coming over into student affairs? It's a really cool industry, and you're good at working with students. And I told them they were crazy. And so fast forward, April 1st, 2014, my mom calls me up, and she's like, Mike, I got the call. And I'm like, what call are you talking about? And it was a call to get a liver and kidney transplant. And
oh, wow.
I was 4 months into my student affairs career there. The same people that said, hey, you should jump into student affairs, you'd be good at it. I finally listened to them. It took 2 or 3 times for them to knock on my door and say, hey, you should apply for these jobs. But I finally jumped into student affairs. I'm 4 months into my career there, and my mom calls me, and she has that liver and kidney transplant. At that point in time, that's April 1st, 2014, I really didn't know much about student affairs. I didn't know much about the industry. I was 4 months in. I'm learning. I'm trying to grow, and then this happens. And so she gets the transplant. Obviously, clearly, when you have a transplant, it's a long road to recovery. It's not smooth. You have to take medicines. You have to live near the hospital. You can't move back home for some time. And so we just went through it as a family. 2 months later, same person that talked me into getting into student affairs, his name is Dr. Dakota Doman, amazing person, shout out to him. He said, hey, I'm going to create a position down here in Victoria. If I create it, would you come? And it was an instant yes for me this time. And it was an instant yes because it was an hour away from my hometown. This was the closest 4-year university to my hometown, and my mom had just had a liver and kidney transplant. It's crazy. I didn't even know about the University of Houston, Victoria at the time. I grew up an hour away from this 4-year school and didn't know it. Wow, that's wild. So we were a small school that downward expanded in 2010, hadn't really created traditions and experiences and things like that. And so I ended up going there and taking the job, and I was there for the last almost 10 years before this past year, coming to the University of South Alabama. Go Jags, as you said earlier.
Jay's up.
Jay's up. It was an interesting pathway the last 10 to 12 years in student affairs. But what I can tell you is in that moment when I jumped into this career, I had a transformative thing happen to me. My mom and everything that she went through.
Right.
And so she gets that transplant. And here's the thing that I saw that really made me fall in love with student affairs and the work that we do in higher education. It was the people. And I know it sounds a little weird saying this, connecting people in a hospital setting to people in higher education. But ultimately, people, I believe, are on this earth to help each other, to lift one another up. And I saw nurses, doctors, folks save my mom's life.
Yeah.
It was truly incredible. And so here I was starting this journey, new journey in student affairs, and I had the opportunity to change students' lives every single day. And I believe that has inspired me the last decade in student affairs to chase this student affairs dream and to push to be the best that I can be. And so I've had some imposter syndrome along the way, being that sports guy coming from the sports world. You're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure it out. And so I feel like I've been in this rat race, trying to learn as much as I can, grow as much as I can. And it's been a beautiful journey, but I can tell you higher education, it's a special place. You have the opportunity to impact people every day. And that's kind of how I came into this field. I've worked my whole career in higher ed, but the first half of it was sports and athletics, and now here I am in student affairs helping people doing what I'm doing now.
That's quite the journey, and the story that brings the core of what's fundamental to you to the surface. I think it's really insightful to think back on that time period when you've got a lot of transitions going on, a lot of heavy things going on, and you said that your father said, "We're not going to give up on mom." And I would think that just based on what you're describing, that mindset carries over to today when you're looking at your students, and we're not going to give up on the students.
Absolutely.
And you talk about this kind of full circle moment and how you get ultimately into higher education, into student affairs, and going from athletics, ticket sales to that. I mean, that's an incredible journey. But I think, when you look at those core values and those things that are fundamental to you, and how does that guide you into this career then, really stepping into a leadership role, probably more so than you ever imagined when you first thought about student affairs. I mean, now you're the assistant vice president. How does that all kind of connect for you, those things that are core values for you?
Well, it's a privilege, first and foremost. So I don't take any day for granted. It's still mind-blowing to me, that imposter syndrome that I mentioned, athletics into student affairs. I have it in these leadership roles. One thing that I've learned is we're all human beings. Going back to when I was with the Houston Rockets as an intern, I had a life-changing moment then. They would send interns on all sorts of errands around town to do different things. And I was sent on an errand one day. We were having a gala at the Toyota Center, and they sent me to a house to pick up wine. And I was like, okay, we'll go pick up this wine. So here I am riding around Houston in this Houston Rockets pickup truck, and I roll up to this address to pick up the wine. They failed to tell me where I was picking up the wine at. They just gave me the address. And so I roll into the richest neighborhood in Houston, and I walk up to the door, and I'm like, this is really weird. Why am I picking up wine from a house? And the front door opens, and it's the owner of the Houston Rockets, somebody that I grew up watching, idolizing, billionaire dude. I'm like, he owns the sports team that I grew up a childhood fan of. And that moment, he walked me into the door, sat me at his kitchen table. He sent somebody to go get the wine that I was there to pick up, but he sat there for 10, 15 minutes with me and had a human being conversation. That moment made me realize that this dude's a billionaire, but he bleeds just like me. He uses the restroom just like me. And so that's something that changed my whole perspective, was that one moment going to the Houston Rockets owner's house and picking up that wine. But to answer your question, values. So I mentioned my family, my mom's story. That's so critical to me. Family is one of my big values. I'm a new father. I've got a 2-year-old son.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you. His name is Rio. My wife and I, Raisha, we are thrilled to be new parents. It's a whole lot of fun, and we learn something new every single day, as y'all know. And we're talking about Spider-Man before we got on here, and it's a different world that you live in. So family is important to me. Trust is important to me. I believe anytime you have a working relationship with somebody, whether it's in the professional industry or at home, in a relationship, I've learned in my marriage that, you have to have trust. You have to communicate. You have to talk to one another. And I think that's critical. Having empathy for folks, I think that's really key. I'm a first generation college student. Earlier you mentioned something that made me think about the students that we serve each and every single day. These students are so nervous when they come to college. Sure. And I think about when I went to college, walked through the doors at the Air Force Academy and didn't know what to expect. Those are the same students that we serve every single day. It doesn't matter the school, doesn't matter the state, no matter where they're at, every single one of them is scared. And so I think it's important to put yourself in their shoes, and trying to relate with people is really essential. The other thing I would say is just creating happiness for folks. Mm-hmm. Right. One of the things I really appreciated, and by the way, you guys have been amazing showing me around the facility, and I love the team culture that you guys have here, and how you lean into your values. Every corner around this building, you see something related to the values, and I think that's really important. So for me, as I walk through and live my day-to-day life as I'm serving students, I try to lean into my values. I'm a sports official. We might talk about that at some point, but being a sports official, you have to be fair. You have to be equitable. You want to give everybody a fair chance at winning that game. Now, I can tell you, being a sports official, it doesn't matter what field or court you walk into, half the place is going to think you're cheating. Yep. You have to have thick skin and be able to work through that. But creating opportunities for people and platforms for people to thrive, that's something that's important to me, and I get to do that every day in higher ed, and not just in higher ed, but in my personal life too. I didn't used to think that way 15 years ago. I was, living life for myself and, doing whatever I was doing, a lot of things that I don't do these days. Sure. But now I live by that, by that motto. Yeah. Take care of people, lift them up.
There's a few things there to unpack. I think first and foremost, you go back to the imposter syndrome. Yep. And I think that's true for anyone. You have those core values, those things, whether it's with your business, with yourself. But if you can align your day-to-day with those core values, it so greatly helps reduce that imposter syndrome that everyone feels at some point. And when you look at the pivotal moment of becoming a father, we're all dads here at the table. Mm-hmm. There's just something with the mindset that comes with that, and it changes your perspective on things. It changes how you live your day to day. It changes your motivations in a lot of ways. You mentioned living life for yourself, and not so much things you do these days. Mm-hmm. I would imagine that pivotal moment just 2 years ago for you, absolutely is like a light bulb moment. Absolutely. All right. So when you look at your career then, and you look at this pathway you're paving on student affairs, for our listeners out there that maybe aren't as familiar with student affairs, how would you describe what student affairs is on a campus and how the role that it plays for that student experience? Yeah,
that's a wonderful question. So I try to tell my parents and my family members, we're joking about it earlier today. Nobody really knows what I do in my family, and I try to tell folks, hey, this is student affairs. This is what I do on a day-to-day basis. So for me, every school is different. Every student affairs structure is different. But for me at my school right now, I supervise things like student involvement, fraternity and sorority life, our activities board, so all the fun stuff outside of the classroom. But then I also supervise our counseling and wellness center and our Title IX department and our conduct department. So more serious things, you're focusing on things like mental health. You're focusing on things like behavioral issues. So it's a wide array of things. But when you think about a campus community, I think of it like a little city or a little town.
That's a great analogy.
You have, think about it, you have dining halls, you have housing, you have workout facilities. Like we were talking about how amazing y'all space is here at Club Colors. You can go downstairs and work out. You can go downstairs and get lunch. That's kind of how a college or university is. And I think we play a critical role in the university experience, and not just the university experience, but the life experience of these students. And so for me, I'm big on these students gaining things during their 4, 5, 6 years, whatever it is in college. It's not just about coming and getting that degree. It's also about all of the other things outside of that degree. Are you learning to work with people? Are you learning marketable skills for the workforce? Things like communication, teamwork, problem solving. And guess where they get a lot of those things at? Outside of the classroom, being a part of a student organization, fraternity, sorority, activities board, SGA. Those are where marketable skills for the workplace are learned. Plus, you're learning the subject matter in the classroom. And then, by the way, there's all this real life stuff that happens during the same time. And so, for me,
It sounds like you may have wrote a dissertation on.
Maybe I might have. I did write a dissertation. It was on marketable skills that student leaders gain for the workforce through that work. But the best conversations, the best moments in my career happen behind closed doors, one-on-one with students. It's the students that don't know what to do. They don't know how to get from point A to point B. And I think that all of us in higher education, in particular student affairs, we're a conduit to helping them get from wherever that point A to point B. And that all of them, that point B is to walk across that commencement stage and get a job and go out in the workforce and be successful.
Yeah, that's a great point there, Mike. I mean, you came from a smaller school and then obviously now work at one with 13,000 students, right? So how do you still implement that with obviously a bigger community and a bigger student body? How do you still get that one-on-one time and really make sure that you're making an impact on these guys?
Wonderful question. I had imposter syndrome when I got to South Alabama. So you go from a school of 4,000 to 14,000. That's a big jump. No matter how confident you are in your abilities, it's still scary. And a good friend of mine, he taught me this saying one time, and it sticks with me, about where you work and what you do and, who you are. He said this. He said, if you can swim in 3 feet of water, you can swim in 30 feet of water, you can swim in 300 feet of water. It's all about your form.
Right.
And my form, in student affairs and higher ed and just as a person, I'm confident in my form and my ability. And so I'm going back to values, what we talked about earlier. I try to lean into my values. I try to lean into who I am as a person, as a professional. And at the end of the day, you can't work with all 14,000 of them at one time, no matter what your position is, no matter what your role is. You're going to be working with individuals or small groups of individuals or clusters. And I think the most important thing is your form and not being intimidated by it all. And when you talk about finding time and making that space for those interactions with students and helping them grow, my wife would tell you there's a lot of late nights. I'm not home at 5:30 every day. That's for sure. And there's time spent on the weekends, because I'm catching up on work that I didn't get done during the week because I'm spending time one-on-one with students, or I'm going to meet with that student organization that needs help in that moment. And so you find time. If you care about what you do, like I do, you find that time. And I care about helping these students and helping them grow. It's a critical point in their life, 18 to 25 years old. I think back when I was that age, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And, I wish I had somebody like myself to pour into me and give advice to me. And so I just try to be the person that I didn't necessarily have as a first-gen college student going through it myself.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's right. I mean, I don't know about you, Chris, but sometimes feel that way as well, right, with a growing company. I mean, as long as you have that guiding light, those core values to lean back on, just going to let that lead the way.
Yeah. And, you mentioned the student experience, the student organizations in particular. And I know this is something that varies from campus to campus. I would imagine at a school your size, you have a couple hundred student organizations. Yep. So what's it like managing, really getting students involved with those and the promotion side of it, and how you use the brand to really get awareness out to campus, how to get involved?
Sure. Well, one, you have to be able to tell a story of the importance of it. So going back to the skills that they gain by being involved, you can go in front of a room and say, hey, join this club or do this and do that. But, you're talking to a room. If you don't have a reason to give them, if you can't sell it, they may or may not. They might do it or they might not. But if you can sell the why, it definitely helps. We have 250 plus student orgs on our campus, and it's a lot, like you said.
Yeah.
There ends up being a lot of duplication of clubs and organizations. And, we were having a conversation on our campus the other day, how we have 8 or 9 organizations of the same type of thing that they do. And there was conversation about how do we reduce those and focus them. And to me, in my mind, I didn't say it out loud, but I was thinking, let them be, let them do what they want to do, because at the end of the day, even if you have the same topic, for example, of an organization that you're working with on a college campus, you have different people. Yeah. And people have different personalities. And so that group cohesion, being able to work together, that's an interesting component. But going back to how do you get the word out? Tell the story. You get connected with faculty members. You tell them at orientation. You talk to them as they're coming in. And then the most powerful thing, honestly, is your current student leaders. Yeah. There's nothing I prioritize more in my job than the current student leaders that I work with. And If you have amazing student leaders on your campus, they're going to go and tell that story. And then they're going to go and graduate, and they're going to go and do good work. And then they're going to tell their friends, hey, look at the skills that I gained from being SGA president, and look what I'm doing now. So I've been at South Alabama for a year, and give you an example. One of the people that, when I walked into that space, I said, how do I learn on this campus? I don't know anything about this campus, anything about this space, this community. Who's the first person I want to talk to? So I went and talked to our SGA president, sat down with her, and she gave me everything. She gave me the tea, the good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent, and told me everything that I needed to know. And fast forward, she's now a graduate assistant working for me as a digital media GA. She's working on video, social media type content to help us tell that story better of our student organizations and the good work that we do. One of the mysteries in higher education, it kind of bothers me, across the board, is we don't tell our story, and especially in student affairs. There's a lot of people, and you guys meet with a lot of people. You work with a lot of people in the industry. You know, they place orders with you. They get product from y'all, and you have relationships with these individuals. And I'm sure in your mind, you're like, man, these are really talented people. But then you look them up online, and you're like, you don't find them. They're a ghost. Yep. And I think for me, I'm trying to, on my end, do my part of breaking the stigma of, hey, put yourself out there. Tell folks who you are. Tell your story on social media. The good, the bad, the ugly. I'm a human being after all, too, just like everybody else. No matter my position, no matter where I go in life, I want to tell that story. And I think we don't do a good enough job of that in higher education across the board.